They're moments you think you've prepared for, moments you've played out in your head 100 times, practiced the smile, ironed the dress, told yourself you were ready, and then the moment arrives and you realize you were never ready at all. My name is Loretta Mae Hutchins. I'm 63 years old. I worked as a licensed practical nurse for 31 years. I raised my son alone in a 2-bedroom house in Lexington, Kentucky with a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom and a furnace that quit every February. I never remarried after my husband left. I never had the time, and honestly, I never had the desire. My son was enough. He was more than enough. He was everything. And on the day of his wedding, I found out exactly what I was worth to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My son's name is Davis. He was born on a Tuesday in March, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, with my mother's chin and his father's ears. And from the first moment I held him, I understood that my life had been reorganized entirely. I was 28. I was terrified. And I was so full of love it felt like a physical thing, like something that could lift me off the floor. His father was gone by the time Davis was 18 months old. It wasn't dramatic. No big fight, no scene. He just started coming home later, and then one evening he didn't come home at all. He called from his brother's house in Cincinnati, said he needed space, said he wasn't ready for this kind of life. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding the phone, Davis asleep in the next room, and thinking, nobody asked you if you were ready. We're doing it anyway, and we did. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to cover the mortgage. I worked nights when I had to, leaving Davis with my neighbor, Mrs. Zeberstein. Petty, an older woman who watched him for $20 a night and always had peanut butter crackers waiting when he woke up. I bought his school clothes at the consignment shop on Main Street and told him it was a special store. He believed me until he was about 9, and then he knew, and he never said a word about it. That's the thing about Davis that I loved most in those early years. He noticed things. He was kind. He would bring me a glass of water when I sat down on the couch after a long shift. He'd leave the bathroom light on for me when I came home late so I didn't have to walk into a dark house. Small things. But small things are how you know who someone is. I scrimped and saved for 15 years to put money into his college fund. Not a big fund, but enough for 2 years at the state university. He got a partial scholarship for the rest. He studied business administration. He was sharp about money in a way I never was, and I was proud of that. Proud in the way that makes your chest feel too small to hold it. He met Serena in his junior year. I remember the first time he mentioned her. He called me on a Sunday, which was our usual call day, and he said, "Mom, I've been spending some time with this girl from my economics class." His voice had a different quality to it. Lighter somehow. I thought, good for him. The first time I met Serena, she was polite, pretty, in a careful way, like someone who had thought very hard about how they wanted to be perceived. Her handshake was firm. She called me ma'am. She said all the right things. But there was something behind her eyes that I couldn't quite name, something that watched and measured. I told myself I was imagining it. Her family was from a different world than ours. Her father, Martin, ran a commercial real estate company in Louisville. Her mother, Patricia, organized charity galas, chaired committees, served on boards. Their house had a name. Not an address. A name. Rolling Meadows. Like it was an estate in an English novel. Within 6 months of Davis meeting Serena, I noticed things starting to shift. He stopped calling every Sunday. When he did call, the conversations were shorter. Easier questions, less feeling. He'd use phrases I'd never heard from him before. Phrases that sounded like they'd been imported from somewhere else. "We're pivoting our priorities," he said once, talking about a vacation he was planning. I thought, you grew up eating macaroni out of a box 2 nights a week. What exactly are we pivoting from? I didn't say that out loud. I told myself to be patient. He was young. He was in love. Young people in love do foolish things. But then the invitations stopped. Not all at once. Just one by one. Quietly. Like lights going out in a house. He had a birthday party that first year he was serious with Serena. A dinner at a restaurant in Louisville. I found out about it afterward, in a phone call where he mentioned it casually, like he'd assumed I'd known and just hadn't been able to come. I hadn't known. I hadn't been invited. I sat with that for a few days before I said anything, and when I finally brought it up, he said, "Mom, it was just a casual thing. Serena's parents were there. It wasn't a big deal." Serena's parents were there, but I wasn't. I bought new clothes the next time I was set to visit him. I'd been wearing the same rotation of scrubs and church dresses for years. I went to Kohl's and spent more than I should have on a decent blouse and slacks. I thought maybe I wasn't keeping up. Maybe I was an embarrassment without knowing it. That's the thing about being made to feel small. You start to believe the problem is yours. The visit was fine, surface level fine. We ate at a nice restaurant near campus. Serena was there, which I'd expected. Her mother, Patricia, was also there, which I had not expected. Patricia wore a silk blouse and spoke about upcoming charity events with the confidence of someone who has never once checked the price of anything at a grocery store. She glanced at me the way you glance at furniture you're not sure about, not rude, just evaluating. Davis laughed at her jokes a half-second longer than necessary. I drove home that night thinking about the version of my son who used to leave the bathroom light on for me. He got engaged on New Year's Eve of the following year. He got me next morning. His voice was happy in a real way, not performed. I felt genuine joy for him. I said, "Davis, I'm so happy for you. I love you." And he said, "Thanks, Mom. The wedding will probably be next fall. We'll be in touch about the details." We'll be in touch. Like I was a vendor. The planning began, and I was not part of it. Serena's mother handled everything. The venue, a historic property outside Louisville with a garden and a wine cellar, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band, all of it, Patricia. I heard about decisions after they were made, in brief updates from Davis that felt more like press releases than conversations. I asked once if I could help with anything. Davis said, "Patricia's really got it covered, Mom. She knows all the vendors. It's easier this way." I said okay. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. 3 weeks before the wedding, I drove to Louisville to see Davis. I brought a tin of the molasses cookies he'd loved since he was 8. I hadn't been to his apartment in months. Serena answered the door. She smiled, said Davis was running an errand. "Come on in." I sat on the couch while she made coffee. She was perfectly pleasant. And then, in the middle of handing me a mug, she said, almost as an aside, "Oh, I've been meaning to mention. For the ceremony itself, the processional, we've arranged for Davis to walk in with my mother. Since she coordinated the whole event, he thought it would be a sweet tribute." She smiled. "I hope that's okay." I looked at her. She held my gaze for exactly as long as confidence requires. "Of course," I said. I drove home that evening with a tin of cookies on the passenger seat. Half of them were still there. Davis had come back while I was leaving, given me a quick hug, said the cookies looked great. He didn't mention the processional. He didn't mention it because she already had. I didn't sleep well after that. I spent those 3 weeks trying to talk myself into something. Tolerance, grace, perspective. I told myself it was one moment in a long ceremony. I told myself what mattered was being there. I had raised that boy. I had poured 30 years of my life into him, every dollar of overtime, every meal I stretched to last one more night, every school form I signed alone at the kitchen table. I had done it all, and I would sit in a pew and watch another woman walk my son down the aisle, and I would keep a pleasant expression on my face because that is what you do. The morning of the wedding, I wore a sage green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. My friend Claudette did my hair. I wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. I looked in the mirror and I thought, "You look fine. You look like his mother." The venue was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Everything coordinated, nothing accidental. I found my seat, 3rd row back, on the groom's side, near the end. I had expected the front row. I didn't say anything to the young man who showed me to it. He handed me a program and moved on. Patricia sat in the front row. She was wearing pale gold. Davis came to speak to me briefly before things started. He looked handsome. My heart did something complicated when I saw him. I reached up and straightened his lapel, the way I had straightened his collars before school all those years ago, and he let me. And for just a moment, he looked like my boy. Then his eyes went somewhere past my shoulder and he said, "I have to go check on Serena." "You look great, Mom." He kissed my cheek and was gone. The ceremony began, the processional music started, and I watched Patricia take my son's arm and walk him toward the altar. She was smiling, he was smiling, people in the pews were smiling. I stared at the flower arrangement at the end of my row. White roses. The stems were cut at exactly the same height. I focused on that until the feeling in my chest settled into something I could manage. At the reception, there was a photo area, a wall of greenery with the couple's initials in gold wire letters. I watched family after family pose with Davis and Serena. Patricia, Martin, Serena's sister, Serena's grandmother, her aunts and cousins. The photographer moved them efficiently from group to group. At one point, Davis looked over at me across the room. I smiled. He started to raise his hand like he might wave me over, and then Patricia said something to him and his attention went back to her. I was never called for a photo. I sat at table 7, not at the family tables, which were 1 through 4. Table 7 was near the back, next to the bar cart, next to a couple I didn't know who were friends of Serena's from graduate school. They were perfectly nice. We talked about the weather and the food. I ate the salmon. I drank 1 glass of wine. I left before the dancing started. I didn't cry in the car. I had used up my tears somewhere during the processional without fully realizing it. I just drove home on the interstate in the dark, the radio off, watching the yellow lines pass. When I got home, I took off the sage green dress. I hung it carefully in the closet. I sat on the edge of my bed in my slip, and I thought about the 31 years I'd spent nursing strangers back to health, all the night shifts, all the holidays, all the times I'd held someone's hand during the worst moment of their life, a stranger's hand, because that's what the job required. I had given that kind of care to strangers. To my own son, I had given everything I had, and he had seated me at table 7. There was a moment that night when I could have called him, could have said, "Davis, I need you to understand what happened today, what it did to me." I sat with my hand on my phone for a long time. I didn't call. I decided, sitting there on the edge of my bed at 63 years old, that I was finished making myself small to fit into whatever space was offered to me. I was finished waiting to be called over for the photo. I was finished apologizing for existing. That night was the last night I cried over it. The weeks after the wedding were quiet. Davis and Serena went to Portugal for their honeymoon. He sent me one picture, a harbor view with a text that said, "Thinking of you?" 2 exclamation points. I wrote back a heart emoji. I put my phone down and went for a walk. During that walk, something opened up in my mind that had been closed for a long time. I had 18 months until I could retire with full benefits. I had a good pension coming. I had a house that was paid off because I had made that the priority above everything else after Davis left for college. I had Claudette, who had been my friend for 20 years and who had said to me, unprompted, the day after the wedding, "Loretta, I don't know how you sat through that." I had other friends. I had a life that existed independently of my son's estimation of me. I started writing again. I had kept a journal as a young woman and stopped somewhere around when Davis was 5 because there simply wasn't time. I bought a new one, a plain green hardcover from the pharmacy, and I started putting things down. Not angry things, just honest things. What I remembered, what I felt, what I wanted my life to look like now. I also did something I had put off for 11 years. I called the university's continuing education office and asked about their community education instructor program. I had thought about teaching, specifically teaching caregiving skills to families who had loved ones with chronic illness, for years. Had never done it because I was always too tired, too busy, too focused on Davis. I went in for an interview. 2 weeks later, they offered me a monthly class slot, a Saturday morning session, 8 weeks per session. I said yes. I was terrified. I said yes anyway. Davis called about a month after the honeymoon. It was a Sunday, our old call day, though he had long since stopped keeping it. I was surprised to see his name on my screen. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, Davis. How are you doing?" "Really well, actually. Busy." A pause. "Busy with what?" "I'm teaching a class at UK's continuing education program. Saturdays." Another pause. "I didn't know you wanted to do that." "I didn't either, for a long time." We talked for a little while. It was stilted, like two people who know they need to have a harder conversation and are circling it. Before he hung up, he said, "I've been thinking about you, Mom. I want to have you over for dinner sometime." "I'd like that," I said. Let me know when. He took 3 weeks to follow up. When he did, it was a text, not a call. Dinner at their place the following Saturday. I wrote back that Saturday mornings were my class days, but I could do the following weekend. He responded, "Oh, right. Okay." Something had shifted. I couldn't have named exactly what, but something in the transaction had changed. Dinner was quiet and careful. Their apartment was beautiful, Serena had a talent for decorating, and the food was good, a roast chicken with vegetables that Serena had clearly worked hard on. I complimented it sincerely. We talked about safe things. Davis's work, my teaching class, our road trip Claudette and I were planning. Toward the end of the evening, Davis walked me to my car. It was a mild night, early spring, and the air smelled like something about to happen. "Mom," he said, "I want to say something." I waited. I know some things were done in a way that wasn't right. I know you got seated where you got seated, and I know you weren't. He stopped. I let a lot of things be decided without thinking about how they would feel to you, and I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long moment. The streetlight was behind him. He looked like himself, the way he used to look when he was trying to tell me something difficult. "I accept your apology," I said. "But Davis, I need you to understand something. An apology is the beginning. It's not the destination. I need to see how you move forward, how you make decisions when my feelings are in the room." He nodded. His jaw tightened a little the way it did when he was taking something seriously. "I know," he said. "I know that." We hugged. Not a quick cheek-and-go hug, a real one. I drove home thinking, that is a start. That's all it is. A start. What happened with Patricia, I didn't engineer. I want to be clear about that. I didn't pursue it, I didn't wish for it, and when it came I felt something that surprised me, something more like sadness than satisfaction. It came out in pieces over the course of the following months. First, I heard from Davis that the family's real estate company was under review for some kind of financial irregularity, something involving misrepresented property assessments over several years. I didn't ask for details. Then Serena mentioned, during a phone call that had become more frequent as the year went on, that her mother had stepped down from her charity board positions. "It's complicated," Serena said. I said, "I'm sure it is." Then Davis told me, quietly, during one of our dinners, that Martin had been formally charged, that the company was being restructured under new management, that a significant portion of the family's assets were frozen pending the investigation. "Patricia is really struggling," Davis said. I looked at him across the table. "She helped you a great deal," I said carefully, "but that help came with a cost you didn't understand until it was too late. Some people give in order to own." Davis was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you think she was doing?" "I think she was doing what felt natural to her. I don't think she knew another way." Serena called me the following week, not Davis, Serena herself. She asked if I'd like to have coffee. Just the two of us, we met at a small place near her office. She was different in person than she'd ever been before. Less composed somehow. She ordered a plain black coffee and held the mug with both hands. "I owe you something," she said. I waited. The wedding, the way things were arranged. I knew it wasn't fair to you. I knew from the beginning. She looked at her coffee. My mother can be very directive, and I was used to letting her direct things. I've been used to it my whole life. She looked up at me. "That's not an excuse. I just want you to understand what I let happen and that I'm ashamed of it." I thought about the day she told me about the processional, so casual, so quick, like it was a scheduling note. "I appreciate you saying this," I said, "and I want to be honest with you. What happened hurt me. It hurt more than I showed anyone, but I'm not interested in holding on to it. What I'm interested in is what comes next." She nodded. Her eyes were wet. "I want to do better by you," she said. "I want Davis to do better by you. He's better than the person he was acting like. I've told him that." "I know he is," I said. "I raised him." She gave a small laugh at that, a real one. We finished our coffee. When we walked out, she hugged me, a little awkwardly at first, and then more firmly. I thought, this one might actually be worth something. My first-class cohort graduated at the end of 8 weeks. 12 people, ranging in age from 25 to 71, all of them navigating some version of caring for a family member with illness. At the end of the last session, a man named Raymond, whose wife had advanced Parkinson's, came up to me after class. He said, "I came here because my daughter made me. I thought it was going to be a waste of a Saturday. But you changed how I think about it. You made me feel like I could do this." He shook his head. "Thank you." I drove home from that class and sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes, not crying, just sitting with it. The feeling of having done something that mattered, something that was entirely mine. The following spring, Davis called me 2 weeks before Mother's Day. He asked if I'd like to come for dinner. Not just dinner, a whole day. "Serena and I want to do it right this year," he said. I arrived that Sunday to find that they had set up their little back patio with string lights, a table I'd never seen before, which turned out to be one they'd bought specifically for outdoor dinners. Serena had made my grandmother's recipe for strawberry cake, which Davis had sent her. There were photos on the table. Photos of Davis growing up. School pictures. The summer we drove to the Smoky Mountains, his high school graduation where he'd been so nervous he'd left his cap in the car. And in the center, in a frame I recognized, was a photograph I hadn't seen in years. Davis at around 6 years old, sitting on a suitcase in a driveway of the old house on Maple Street, laughing, wearing a striped shirt. I was kneeling next to him. My hair was short back then, and I was sunburned from a weekend in a backyard, and I was laughing too, and we were looking at each other. I stood there looking at that photograph for a long time. "I found it in one of your old albums," Davis said, coming to stand next to me. "I wanted you to see it. I wanted to remember it." I couldn't speak for a moment. "You were a good kid," I finally said. "I wasn't for a while," he said. "No," I agreed, "but you came back to it." He put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him a little, the way I used to when he was small, and the world felt too heavy. That evening, after the food and the cake, after Serena had gone inside to make coffee and it was just the two of us in the warm spring air, Davis said something I hadn't expected. He said, "I talked to my father." I went very still. "He reached out. About 6 months ago. He's in Columbus now. He has a family." I waited. "I don't know what I'm going to do with that," Davis said. "But I've been thinking a lot about what it takes to actually show up for someone. Not just to be around, but to actually show up. And I realized the only person who ever consistently did that for me was you." He looked at me. "I want you to know that I know that. I know it now in a way I didn't let myself know it before. I thought about the bathroom light he used to leave on for me. I thought about him at 8 years old, bringing me water when I sat on the couch after a long shift. The kindness was always in him. I had not been wrong about that. I'm not going anywhere," I said, "but I'm also not waiting anymore. You understand the difference?" He nodded. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. I have a life now that feels like mine. I retire in 6 months, and I intend to keep teaching, expand the program, maybe eventually write something about the caregiving families I've worked with over the years. Claudette and I are going to the Pacific Northwest in September. I have a garden I've been neglecting for years and have recently started taking seriously. I grow tomatoes and peppers and, this year, herbs. The sage green dress is still in my closet. I haven't gotten rid of it. Some days I think I will. Other days I think, it fits. It fits, and I look like his mother. And maybe someday I'll wear it again to something that lets me stand where I belong." Davis calls on Sundays again. It's not a perfect relationship. I don't think perfect is the goal. The goal is honest. The goal is present. The goal is two people who choose to stay in each other's lives because they want to, not because one of them has made it impossible for the other to leave. I'm telling this story because for a long time I thought the worst thing that happened to me was that table 7, that processional. That moment I drove home alone in the dark. But the worst thing would have been staying quiet about it, staying invisible, deciding that a seat at the back was all I deserved and letting that be the end of the story. The truth is that no one hands you your dignity back. You have to pick it up yourself. You have to decide what your life is for after all the years of making it about someone else. And that decision, that quiet, private, unglamorous decision, made in a bedroom in Lexington, Kentucky, at 63 years old, in a slip with no witness in the world, that was the real turning point. Not the award, not the apology, not the photograph on the patio table. Me deciding to keep going. If you have ever felt invisible in the life of someone you gave everything to, I want you to hear this. Your love was not wasted. Love is never wasted. But you do not have to wait for them to recognize its value before you recognize your own. You are more than what they made you. You are more than table 7. If this story sounds like yours in any way, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. You don't have to be alone in this. None of us do. Thank you for being here with me. I'll see you next time. I've thought a lot about what made things turn out the way they did. Not in a mystical way, not looking for some grand explanation in the sky, just the plain, practical truth of it. The way you treat people tends to come back around, and not because the universe is keeping score, but because the people you treat badly eventually stop absorbing it. They stop bending themselves into shapes that fit your convenience. And when that happens, everything built on top of their silence starts to shift. Patricia built her whole identity on being indispensable. She paid for things, organized things, positioned herself at the center of every important moment because that was the only kind of love she understood. Transactional love. Love that comes with a ledger, and for a while it worked. Davis was young and dazzled and wanted to belong to something that looked successful. I understood that. I wasn't angry at him for wanting it. I just knew, the way you know certain things after 63 years of living, that it wasn't going to hold. What I couldn't have predicted was how fast it unraveled once the money disappeared. The people who had orbited Patricia for years were gone almost overnight. Because that's what happens when the currency runs out. You find out who was actually there for you and who was there for what you could provide. She found herself alone in a way she had never prepared for because she had spent her whole life buying company instead of earning it. And earning it is slow, unglamorous work. It doesn't look like silk blouses or charity galas. It looks like leaving the bathroom light on. It looks like molasses cookies on a Tuesday. Davis saw it. That's what matters to me now. He saw what real love looks like next to counterfeit love, and he was honest enough with himself to name the difference. That took something from him. Some courage I wasn't sure he still had. And when he said to me, sitting on that patio in the spring air, that I was the only person who had consistently shown up for him, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something quieter than that, something closer to relief. Because here's what I know about myself that I didn't fully know before. That night I sat on the edge of my bed in Lexington. I had spent 30 years pouring everything I had into someone else's life and almost nothing into my own. That isn't virtue. That's a slow erosion of the self. And when Davis pulled away, it forced me to ask a question I had been avoiding for decades. Who am I when I'm not being someone's mother? The answer surprised me. I'm a teacher. I'm a gardener. I'm a friend who makes Claudette laugh until she has to set down her coffee. I'm a woman who has more to offer the world than the inside of a hospital corridor or an empty seat at the back of a wedding venue. Serena once told me she admired my strength. I told her the truth, which is that I didn't feel strong. I felt finished. And then I decided not to be. That's the only real secret I know. You decide to keep going. You pick up the thing you set down 20 years ago because someone needed you and you thought you'd come back to it later. You go back to it now. It's not too late. It is almost never as late as it feels. The sage green dress is still in my closet, and I'm still here.